This day in sports history. This episode is brought to you by Firefly Books, and with you being a sports fan just like me, here's 2 suggestions for your next great sports read. If you love basketball, then you need to add Dave Zarum's book, NBA 75, The Definitive History. Uncover untold stories of triumph, controversy, and the greatest stars of the game. From the league's humble beginnings to its modern glory, it is a courtside seat to 75 years of NBA history. And if you're a golf fanatic, then you gotta check out Matt Adams' book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget. I've used it as a reference in this podcast over the past year for lots of stories that I've done, and I can tell you from experiencing it, this is a great book. Relive 50 of golf's most memorable moments through the eyes of the legends themselves. It's the closest you'll ever get to walking the fairways with the greatest to ever play the game. Grab your copy of NBA 75 or The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, available from Firefly, wherever you get your books. It's July 30th, and on this day in 1990, George Steinbrenner was banned from baseball for life. It would have been a whole lot easier and less costly to just pay Dave Winfield and his foundation. But even though Steinbrenner enjoyed saving a buck here and there, he did not always choose the most prudent path. Back in 1980, Steinbrenner wanted Big Dave Winfield on his ball club. He was a rangy outfielder who could hit for power and was a guaranteed run producer. He'd led the National League in RBI in 1979, playing with the San Diego Padres. Steinbrenner inked Winfield to a 10-year, $15 million deal, the largest in Major League Baseball at the time. He was overjoyed to get him, but the relationship between owner and player began to sour before the ink even dried on his contract. You see, Winfield and his agent had added a cost of living increase into the contract that raised the value from $15 million to $23 million over the course of it. The contract also stipulated that the Yankees would make routine payments to Winfield's charitable foundation. Now, for a guy who always presented himself as an astute businessman, it is kind of strange that he, or his lawyers, did not catch that in the contract, but the smiles and glad-handing on signing day quickly turned to scowls and backstabbing after. By the late 80s, Steinbrenner was sick of the sight of Winfield. He griped to the media that he'd given up Mr. October, Reggie Jackson, and gotten Mr. May. Steinbrenner wanted to trade Winfield, but since Dave was a 10-5 guy, well, he could veto any trade proposed, and he did. Even after Winfield okayed a trade to the Angels, Steinbrenner kept griping about him. That was exacerbated when Winfield sued the Yankees, and in particular Steinbrenner, for failing to make the contractually obligated payments to his foundation, totaling about $300,000. Instead of paying the foundation, Steinbrenner enlisted the help of sports gambler and general pain-in-the-ass Howard Spira to dig up dirt on Winfield and his foundation. Spira, who passed himself off as a former publicist for Winfield's foundation, told Steinbrenner he could substantiate allegations that Winfield misappropriated and misused funds set aside for the foundation in exchange for $150,000 and a job with the Yankees. Steinbrenner paid Spira a total of $40,000 to unearth and bring to light Winfield's shady financial work. In reality, Spira was a gambler, and not a very good one. He was in heavy debt, and he needed the money. When that plot came to light, Spira was arrested and jailed for 22 months for extortion. Commissioner Faye Vincent and Major League Baseball conducted an investigation into the association between Steinbrenner and Spira and concluded it violated the rules of the game. Vincent said, quote, "It is apparent to me that Mr. Steinbrenner does not appreciate the gravity of his conduct. By paying Mr. Spira, Mr. Steinbrenner placed himself at a minimum in the untenable position of having possibly financed the repayment of gambling debts or of bankrolling future wagering. No participant in baseball, let alone the owner of a club, should put himself in such a position." End quote. Vincent banned Steinbrenner for life, but allowed him to maintain his position as owner. He had to forego any day-to-day running of the team, and his lifetime ban only lasted 3 years. But what a wonderful 3 years those turned out to be for the Yankees. Gene Michael was put in control as general manager, and he made a series of franchise-enhancing changes that most believe would not have happened if George had still been in control. Gene Michael drafted Andy Pettitte in the 22nd round, along with Jorge Posada in the 24th round of the 1990 draft. He selected Derek Jeter with the 6th overall pick in the 92 draft, and he watched over the development of Mariano Rivera, a 150-pound Panamanian kid who could not speak a word of English when he was signed by the Yankees in 1990. Those four became the core of the Yankees' 6 World Series titles between 1996 and 2003. Stick, as Gene Michael was known, saw value in Bernie Williams, where Steinbrenner had not, wanting to trade him away instead. Also, Michael worked a deal to bring Paul O'Neill to the Bronx, and the rest is history. This episode is brought to you by Stirling Roastery. For several months you've heard me talking about the great products and scents offered by the Stirling Soap Company. And while there may not seem to be any correlation between soap and coffee, what is similar is the same care and attention to detail in delivering great products to their customers. Stirling Roastery will ship great-tasting beans or ground coffee, for whatever coffee-making process you prefer, right to your door. I gave their breakfast blend a try recently, and I can tell you, it was a great way to get my day kick-started with this smooth, medium blend. And just like their soaps, they have a variety to choose from. Give Stirling Roastery a try at stirlingsoap.com. On this day in 1980, the career of an all-star baseball player came to a screeching halt. Houston Astros pitcher J.R. Richard was already a star. He was a 6'8" fireballer that had been in the major leagues for 9 seasons. But his rise to greatness was not meteoric. It took time for him to mature, learn to control his fastball. He went from leading the league in walks in 1975 to leading the league in strikeouts by 1978. In 1979, Richard once again led the league in strikeouts and had a league-low ERA of 2.71. At age 30, he was coming into his own, and he was on the brink of dominating. He'd just started in his first All-Star game a week before. He was having a Cy Young-type season with a 1.9 ERA and 10 wins already. But he'd been having some issues with his arm for a couple of months. He had complained to team doctors that his arm felt fatigued. He saw more doctors. They ran more tests that came back negative. Maybe, they suggested, it was more of a mental thing than a physical one. There were even rumblings that he heard about later that he was faking it. His work ethic came into question. Maybe it was drug use. It wasn't any of that. He made one start after the All-Star game in Atlanta. He was pulled in the 4th inning saying he couldn't see the catcher's signs because his vision was blurry. But the Astros still thought it was all in his head. They meant figuratively, but in a literal sense, they were not far off. He had a blood clot in his neck that was cutting circulation to his tall frame, and on this day, he suffered a stroke. While tossing the ball around lightly with his teammate Wilbur Howard, Richard collapsed. He was rushed to a hospital where doctors finally realized the problem and performed surgery to remove the clot. The surgery saved his life, but his promising baseball career was over. When he woke up from the surgery, the left side of his body was paralyzed and he could not speak. It took some time for him to regain movement and his speech, but it just was not the same. He rehabbed and worked and came close to a full recovery. After 2 years of that, he tried to make a comeback, but he'd lost some zip on his fastball. Add to that, a complication from his original surgery began to flare up. The artificial artery put in his leg to replace the one removed to put in his neck had collapsed. The risk of further complications was too great, and he had to hang up his glove and cleats for good. There would be no miraculous return to the majors. Sadly, things got worse for him. He tried pivoting to a business venture, investing money he'd made as one of the game's best pitchers. But instead, those business ventures turned out to be bad decisions, and he lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. He also went through 2 divorces that drained his bank account to zero. By 1994, J.R. Richard was homeless and living under a bridge in Houston. But after hitting the proverbial rock bottom, he was able to recover with the help of the church, eventually becoming a minister. He spent a lot of his time helping the homeless and establishing youth baseball leagues in and around Houston until his passing in August 2021 at the age of 71. On this day in 1989, Cuban high jumper Javier Sotomayor became the first human to clear 8 feet in the high jump. Sotomayor was competing in the Caribbean Track and Field Championships. The 6'4", 21-year-old Sotomayor held the world record prior to this jump at 7 feet 11.5 inches. On this day, he steadily rose the bar on each successful jump. After clearing 7 feet 10.5 inches, he requested the bar to go to 8 feet. On his second attempt at that height, he cleared it without a rub of the bar for a new world record. Sotomayor would better his mark 4 years later, literally raising the bar to 8 feet and 1/4 inches, and that remains the men's outdoor record to this day. And I'll wrap up this story with this little nugget. It took 33 years from when American Charles Dumas cleared 7 feet successfully for Sotomayor to clear 8 feet. It's now been 32 years since Sotomayor set the standard at 8 feet and 1/4 inch. And so it begs the question, have we reached what is humanly possible in the high jump? And on this day in 1983, golfer Andy Bean made a mistake that may have cost him a cool $59,000. This was during Saturday's 3rd round of the Canadian Open. His birdie attempt at the 15th hole came up just a tick short, and as he walked to tap it in, he turned the club upside down, holding the blade in his hand, and he tapped it in with the grip of the club. That is a violation of Rule 19, which reads, "The ball must be struck with the head of the club and must not be pushed, scraped, or spooned." Rules officials at the tournament did not notice the mistake, but the PGA's Deputy Commissioner of Tournaments, Clyde Mangum, had watched it on television and recognized the infraction immediately. He made a phone call and let officials know of the rules infraction, and Bean was assessed a 2-stroke penalty before he signed his card that day. Bean felt like an idiot when he was informed of the mistake, and instead of a 75, he shot a 77. Bean tried his best to make amends in the final round, shooting a 62 and tying the course record, but he came up an agonizing 2 shots short of being in a playoff with the eventual winner John Cook and runner-up Johnny Miller. Instead of winning first-place prize money of $76,500, Bean cashed a check for $17,566. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. During World War II, if you wanted a hamburger, it was best to order a Liberty steak. Hamburger sounded a little bit too German, as did sauerkraut, which became Liberty cabbage.
This has been an original Thrive Suite production.